Pygmalion was a very talented sculptor from a city called Cyprus in Greece. He was disgusted by the women in his city. He believed that all the virtuous women were already taken and the rest were either hideous or prostitutes. So he vowed to live a celibate life, forever forsaking women, who he believed existed only for men. He threw himself into his work, taking little breaks and speaking to nobody for weeks, until finally he stepped back from his new creation. When his eyes lit upon the woman of ivory, he was struck by Eros's arrow and fell deeply in love with her. He began to give her gifts, seashells, polished stones, little birds in cages, and flowers of every color. He dressed her in the finest clothing he could find, and he gave her rings and necklaces and earrings made of the most precious of jewels. One day, when he was in town, a group of men asked him who all the gifts were for. Pygmalion proudly announced that he had created the ideal woman out of ivory in his own home, whose perfection was second to only Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love. Intrigued, the citizens of Cyprus would gather in his studio to see the masterpiece he had so arrogantly flaunted. They were awed by her. She was the most wonderful thing they had ever seen. She was so lifelike and divine at the same time. The men gazed upon the statue and then to their wives and felt disappointment and disgust seize their hearts. If such perfection like this can exist in the world, they wondered, then how come they do not have it? How come they were left with such mediocre wives? The women of Cyprus soon began to find ways to enhance whatever beauty they had to please their husbands. They fought over clothing and jewels and covered their faces with powder. Some women were so upset that they threw themselves into this ocean. Pygmalion paid no mind to the chaos that he had started. His attention was only on the beautiful art he had made, touching her, kissing her, and talking to her, as if she were real. Finally, the day of Aphrodite's feast arrived. After completing his duties to her at the altar, he waited for everyone to leave before he began his prayer. He asked the goddess to give him a wife, just like the one he had made. The flames of her altar shot up 3 times, and he hurried home, only to find a woman standing next to his statue, waiting for him. I, Aphrodite the Golden, have been watching from above, and I have heard your prayer. With a flick of her wrist, the statue began to come to life. What was once cold was now warm, and what once was white was now overflowing with color. The woman took her first breath and gazed around in amazement. Her eyes were full of wonder. I, Aphrodite, goddess of love and passion, bring you to life, sweet Galatea, she spoke, and the woman who was once made of ivory was overjoyed. Finally, the maiden had a name. Pygmalion could hardly contain his elation and rushed over to Galatea. He took her in his arms and kissed her cheek, and he turned to the golden goddess and thanked her for her gift and her generosity. Gift, she asked. I didn't do this for you. Aphrodite flicked her wrist again, and in an instant, the arrogant artist who had created a perfection that only God should be capable of was a lifeless statue, never to move again. Aphrodite turned towards her new daughter and held her in a loving embrace. Come, my sweet dear. He shall bother you no more. It is time for you to join me in the heavens, among the gods. In a flash, Aphrodite and Galatea were gone.